You ever sit across from someone you love and feel like you're not really talking anymore? Like the words are there, but the truth is missing. There's laughter, maybe even affection, but something feels off. That's what happens when connection turns into a game, not a playful one, a psychological one. We all crave love, but sometimes instead of building it, we start testing it. We manipulate, withdraw, guilt trip, or pretend. Not because we're evil, because we're scared. Scared of losing control, of getting hurt, of not being enough. And that fear pushes us into patterns that quietly destroy the very love we're desperate to protect. Let's talk about those games. Let's understand them, not to blame anyone, but to free ourselves from them. Because when we understand what we're doing, we can finally start being honest again. You know, sometimes in relationships, we fall into this quiet trap where we expect the other person to just know, to read our minds, sense our moods, and understand every unspoken thought that passes through our hearts. We convince ourselves that if they really cared, they'd notice the change in our tone, the hesitation in our voice, the silence between our words. We believe that love should give them some sort of emotional radar, some magical ability to know what we need, without us ever saying it. And that's where the mind reader game begins. It sounds harmless at first. Maybe you're upset, but instead of saying it, you withdraw. You send shorter texts, you sigh a little louder, you wait quietly for them to ask what's wrong. And when they don't, when they carry on like nothing happened, you start to feel unseen, unimportant, unloved. You start building stories in your head. Maybe they don't care anymore, maybe I don't matter. But the truth is, they might just not know what you're feeling because you never told them. Love isn't a guessing game. It's not about who can read between the lines better or who picks up on the smallest cues. Love is built through honesty, through communication, through the courage to speak your truth, even when it feels uncomfortable. Expecting someone to understand your silence is like expecting them to read a book that hasn't been written yet. I've seen this play out so many times. Two people who genuinely care about each other slowly drifting apart because they stop talking. One assumes the other doesn't care. The other assumes everything's fine. The distance grows, not because they stopped loving each other, but because they stopped being honest about what they felt. It's tragic in its simplicity, a love that dies quietly, not from betrayal or anger, but from silence. We play this game because we're afraid of being too much, afraid of rejection, afraid that if we say what we truly need, the other person might not meet us there. So we hold back. We drop hints. We hope they'll figure it out so we won't have to risk vulnerability. But real love, real connection requires risk. It demands that we open up even when it's hard, even when it might hurt. Because without communication, love becomes an illusion. Think about it. When a child cries, they don't expect their parent to guess what's wrong. They cry out because that's how they communicate. But as we grow older, we're taught to suppress, to play it cool, to act like everything's fine. We start expecting others to decode our silence because expressing ourselves feels weak. But silence isn't strength. It's fear wearing a mask. There's power in saying, "Hey, that hurt me," or "I feel distant from you." There's courage in admitting that something's wrong, even when it shakes your pride. When you express instead of expect, you give your partner a chance to show up. You give them a way to understand you, to love you in the way you need. The truth is, no one can truly know your heart unless you let them in. No one can read your pain if you bury it behind a smile. The mind reader game only creates confusion, resentment, and loneliness. But when you speak your truth, even imperfectly, you build trust, you build safety, you build something real. We all crave to be understood, but understanding doesn't happen through silence. It happens through words, through effort, through presence. It's not about testing someone's love, it's about nurturing it. So if something's weighing on your heart, say it. If something's hurting you, share it. Don't wait for someone to read your silence, because the moment you start speaking honestly, love stops being a guessing game and starts being what it was always meant to be, a place where two imperfect people choose to understand each other again and again. There's a strange thing that happens when people are afraid to look at themselves. They start seeing their reflection in the person standing in front of them. Every mistake, every insecurity, every flaw, they throw it outward instead of looking inward. That's the heart of the blame shifter. It's when someone takes their pain, their confusion, their fear, and hands it to someone else like it doesn't belong to them. They turn their own wounds into weapons, and the person they love becomes the target. It doesn't start with bad intentions, it starts with fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of not being enough, fear of losing control. When you're hurting inside and don't know how to process it, it's easier to point a finger than to look in the mirror. It's easier to say, "You made me angry," than to admit, "I don't know how to deal with my anger." We convince ourselves that our reactions are justified because someone made us feel that way. But no one can make us do anything. They can trigger what's already there, sure, but the choice, the reaction, that's ours. Always. In relationships, this blame game becomes poison. Imagine two people who love each other, but every conflict turns into a battlefield where no one takes responsibility. You forget what you were even fighting for because it's not about solving the problem anymore. It's about winning. You start throwing words you don't mean, digging up things from the past, using guilt as a weapon, all just to protect your ego from the sting of accountability. And in that chaos, love becomes collateral damage. I once heard someone say, "You can be right or you can be at peace," and that hit me, because so many of us would rather protect our pride than protect the bond we've built. We'd rather prove we're right than ask why we're hurting. But the truth is, real strength is never in being right. It's in being honest. It's in saying, "I overreacted. I was scared. I said things I shouldn't have." Those words might feel small, but they carry the power to heal what silence and pride can't. I've seen relationships fall apart, not because of betrayal or distance, but because of this endless cycle of accusation. Every time something went wrong, one person had to be the villain. And slowly, they both forgot that love isn't supposed to have villains, it's supposed to have teammates, partners who face the problem together, not each other. When you blame the person you love for your pain, you stop seeing them as your ally. You turn them into your enemy, and once that happens, it's hard to find your way back. The sad part is, blame always feels easier in the moment. It feels cleaner than vulnerability. You get to feel powerful, justified, even righteous. But deep down, you know it's a cover. Because when the anger fades, you're still left with the same wounds, the same insecurities, the same fears that started it all. Blame doesn't heal, it hides. And anything you hide eventually grows in the dark. Owning your part in something isn't weakness. It's the beginning of freedom. It's saying, "I know I can do better. I know I played a part in this." That's how growth begins. That's how real connection survives conflict. You stop trying to win and start trying to understand. We all make mistakes, we all say things we regret. But the difference between love that fades and love that lasts is humility, the willingness to admit you're human. When two people can look each other in the eye and say, "I'm sorry," without excuses, that's where healing starts. That's where walls come down and trust begins to rebuild itself. So when you catch yourself wanting to point a finger, pause for a second. Ask yourself what you're really afraid of. Because most of the time, it's not the other person who's the problem. It's something unresolved inside you. And when you face that truth, when you stop turning your fear into accusation, you stop playing games. You start creating something real, something honest, something worth fighting for. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. It brings distance. It's not the kind that soothes the mind or heals a wound. It's the kind that feels like standing in a room with someone you love and realizing they've already left without moving an inch. The silent treatment might look calm on the outside, but inside, it's chaos disguised as control. It's the act of shutting down, not to protect your heart, but to punish someone for reaching too close to it. It always starts small, maybe an argument, maybe a misunderstanding. One person feels hurt and decides to retreat. They stop responding, stop explaining, stop existing in the space where love once lived. At first, the silence feels like power, like you're proving a point without saying a word. You think, let them feel what it's like to miss me, let them come crawling back. But the truth is, that silence doesn't make anyone miss you. It makes them feel unseen, unheard, unworthy. It doesn't heal the bond, it cracks it a little more each time. There's this illusion that silence teaches lessons, that by withholding words, affection, or attention, you're making someone realize your value. But real love isn't a classroom, and your partner isn't your student. Love doesn't thrive where communication dies, because the moment you use silence as a weapon, you turn connection into control. You stop being two people trying to understand each other and start being two walls waiting for the other to crumble first. I've seen this play out in couples who genuinely love each other but forget how to talk. One person shuts down thinking the other will chase. The other grows frustrated thinking they're being punished for something they don't even understand. And soon, the silence becomes the third person in the relationship. The one that sits between them at the dinner table, sleeps beside them at night, follows them everywhere. What used to be laughter and warmth turns into tension so thick it feels like breathing through glass. The silent treatment isn't strength, it's fear pretending to be strength. It's saying, I'd rather control the situation through distance than face the discomfort of honesty. But no relationship can survive when silence replaces dialogue. You can't solve what you refuse to talk about. And you can't build love on the foundation of avoidance. I remember someone once telling me I stay quiet so I don't say something I'll regret, but the silence itself became the regret, because while they were protecting their pride, they were also starving the relationship of warmth. Sometimes the most painful words are the ones never spoken, the apologies never given, the explanations never shared, the moments lost because no one dared to break the silence first. Silence can feel safe, it gives you a momentary illusion of control. But control isn't love. Love is surrender. Love is saying, I'm angry, but I still care enough to talk. It's being brave enough to let your vulnerability speak louder than your ego. When you choose communication over punishment, you're not giving up power, you're choosing connection. You're choosing peace over pride. When we use silence to punish, we create wounds we can't see but that never quite heal. The person on the receiving end starts questioning themselves. They replay every moment, every word, wondering what they did wrong, and the one who's silent feels justified, until they realize the silence has created a loneliness that neither apology nor affection can easily repair. We all need moments of quiet, but there's a difference between taking space to breathe and building walls to control. The first one heals, the second one destroys, and the cost of that destruction is often the love we were trying to protect. So, the next time you feel the urge to pull away, to go silent and watch someone else squirm under the weight of it, pause. Ask yourself what you really want. Do you want revenge, or do you want understanding? Do you want power, or do you want peace? Because no relationship thrives in silence. It thrives in the messy, uncomfortable, beautiful honesty of two people choosing to stay, even when it would be easier to disappear behind the quiet. It's strange how something as pure as love can turn into a competition without anyone realizing it. You start out giving freely your time, your care, your energy, because it feels good to make someone happy. But somewhere along the way, you start keeping count. You start noticing who gives more, who apologizes first, who sacrifices most. You start building an invisible scoreboard in your mind, one that quietly measures the worth of your love through the balance of effort. And just like that, love stops being a connection. It becomes a transaction. The scorekeeper doesn't begin with bad intentions, it begins with a wounded heart. Maybe you've been taken for granted before. Maybe you gave everything once and got nothing in return. So now you protect yourself by keeping track. You remind yourself of every favor, every compromise, every time you stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. You turn generosity into currency. And love becomes something you trade, not something you share. But love isn't a business, it's not an exchange of equal value. It's a rhythm of giving and receiving that doesn't always happen at the same time, but balances itself in trust. When you love someone, there will be days when you carry more. Days when they're tired, distant, or lost in their own storm, and you'll have to hold the weight of both hearts for a while. That's not unfair. It's human. Because one day you'll be the one who needs holding. But when you start keeping score, you turn those moments of compassion into resentment. You look at your partner and see not the person you love, but the person who owes you. And nothing kills intimacy faster than that. I've seen it happen to people who love deeply, but couldn't let go of fairness. They'd say things like, I always text first, or I'm the only one trying, And maybe they were right. But love isn't about winning fairness points. It's about creating understanding. When you constantly remind someone of what you've done for them, it stops feeling like love. It starts feeling like guilt. You're no longer giving from the heart, you're giving to collect a debt. And that's a debt no one can ever fully repay because love was never meant to be measured in numbers. There's this illusion that keeping score protects you from being hurt. You tell yourself, if I track how much I give, I'll know when it's time to stop. But love doesn't work like that. The moment you start protecting yourself from it, you stop experiencing it fully. Real love doesn't ask for equal exchange. It asks for understanding, compassion, and the willingness to give even when it's not convenient. That doesn't mean letting yourself be used. It means giving without the expectation of return, trusting that love, in its own time, will come back to you in another form. It's easy to forget that relationships aren't competitions. They're partnerships. You're not supposed to be on opposite teams. You're supposed to be working together towards something bigger than both of you. And sometimes the scoreboard needs to be erased so that connection can breathe again. Because when you stop counting, you start feeling. You start noticing the small things again, the way they listen, the way they show up, the way they try. Those moments can't be measured, but they're what keep love alive. I remember hearing once that love only survives when it's given more than it's demanded. And that's true. When you stop giving with the hope of being repaid, you start giving with peace. You start understanding that love isn't about equality. It's about balance. Some days you'll pour more, some days you'll receive more, and both are okay. That's what real partnership looks like. It's not about who's done more. It's about the fact that you're both still here, still trying, still choosing each other even after the mistakes, the distance, and the misunderstandings. When you love without keeping score, you free yourself. You stop living in resentment and start living in gratitude. You start realizing that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't what you do for them. It's how honestly, how selflessly, how patiently you love them. Because love in its truest form doesn't count. It gives, it forgives, and it grows. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful. It teaches us to stop measuring and start feeling again. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't cry out. It manipulates. It hides behind sad eyes and quiet words that sound like honesty, but carry a deeper purpose, control. The victim player is someone who learns to use their suffering not as a way to heal, but as a way to gain power. They turn their wounds into tools, their sadness into leverage. And sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. Because when pain goes unhealed for too long, it starts to crave attention more than recovery. It often begins with a real wound. Maybe someone betrayed them, maybe they were abandoned, or maybe they just grew up in an environment where love only came through pity. Somewhere along the line, they learned that pain brings care, that sorrow brings closeness. And so, they start to use it. They start to believe that if they suffer enough, someone else will stay. They build their relationships around sympathy, not connection. It's not always intentional. It's survival turned into a strategy. But the problem is, when love grows from pity, it stops being love. It becomes obligation. There's nothing more exhausting than trying to heal someone who refuses to let go of their pain because it gives them control. They say things like, "You don't care about me because you didn't do what I needed," or "If you loved me, you wouldn't hurt me like this." These words sound vulnerable, but underneath them is a quiet demand. Fix me, save me, make me whole. And that kind of pressure crushes any relationship. Because love can hold your hand through the healing process, but it can't do the healing for you. We all have scars, all have stories that could make us fold into ourselves. But at some point, we have to decide whether we want to live in our pain or learn from it. Playing the victim might win temporary comfort, but it destroys long-term trust. Because people start walking on eggshells around you. They stop being honest. They start fearing your reactions, your breakdowns, your accusations. And slowly, love turns into tension. Affection turns into avoidance. The relationship becomes a game of guilt instead of growth. I've seen people who've been through unimaginable things, loss, betrayal, heartbreak, and yet they refuse to make their pain their identity. They acknowledge it, they feel it, they work through it, but they never use it as a weapon. And that's where real strength lives. It's not in pretending you're fine. It's in saying, I'm hurting, but I'm trying to heal. That's vulnerability, not manipulation. That's courage. The victim player doesn't just hurt the people around them. They trap themselves in a loop. They keep reliving the same wounds, the same patterns, because every time they get attention from their pain, it reinforces the idea that this is the only way to be seen. It's like feeding a fire that keeps you warm for a moment, but burns down everything you care about in the long run. When you use pain to control others, you never get the love you want. You just get compliance. People may stay out of guilt, but not out of genuine care, and that emptiness only grows deeper. The truth is, no one else can fill the void inside you until you stop using it as a weapon. You have to face it, sit with it, and let it teach you instead of define you. Because pain, when faced honestly, becomes wisdom. When ignored, it becomes power in the wrong hands. There's something liberating about taking responsibility for your own healing. It doesn't mean the pain was your fault. It means you're choosing not to let it control your future. You stop blaming, stop manipulating, stop expecting someone else to carry what's yours to release. And when you do that, something shifts. You stop needing to prove your pain. You start wanting to grow past it. Love thrives in responsibility. When both people can say, I'm not perfect, but I'm trying, that's when something real begins. But when one person is always the victim, there's no room for growth, no space for truth. Because real love doesn't live in guilt, it lives in freedom. And the moment you stop using your pain to gain power, you gain something far greater, peace. You stop being a prisoner of your past and start becoming the author of your own healing. Relationships aren't battles to be won. They're mirrors. They show us who we are when we're vulnerable, jealous, scared, or kind. The games we play aren't really with others, they're with ourselves. When we stop playing, we start growing. We learn that love isn't about control, silence, or guilt. It's about showing up, speaking truth, forgiving fast, and choosing peace every single day. And maybe that's what real love is. Not perfection, just honesty.